Least favorite monster overall. This is a harder question even than favorite, probably. You can approach it from three different perspectives, in a sense. You can approach it from the perspective of a DM, or from the perspective of a player, or just from the perspective of someone reading a monster manual. And they all have a different perspective, but they all seem, for me, to fall under the same general kind of rule or advice. I'm not sure what I want to say here. I'm very tired and my brain hurts. Anyway, as a DM, I don't have a least favorite monster overall, in the sense that if I don't like the monster, I don't use the monster. I'm only going to put monsters into the game that I like to use as a DM, or that I think I'll like to use, and for the most part, that's worked out very well for me. There are a couple fights, well, we'll get out of that, because that leads down a tangent that's completely unrelated. So far, the only monsters I've used that I disliked were usually due to systems issues. For example, every single monster in 4th edition. I hate the monsters in 4th edition. I get the design ethos behind the way their powers and everything are structured, but they just have way too many hit points. And I know I've done this rant before, but I'll rant it again. So when it comes to sort of more general rules that apply as a DM or a player, or even just reading the book, I don't like save or die monsters, except when I do. So when it comes to save or die, beholders are save or die. In fact, they have multiple save or dies. Basilisk is save or die. A cockatrice is save or die. A Medusa is save or die. I am pretty okay with all of those, actually, because every one of them you can foreshadow considerably, and you can have a Medusa or a Beholder as a big villain that PCs have to go against, or even not being a big villain, you can definitely have a group of Beholders, and the PCs know they're going up against, Beholders, or maybe they have to infiltrate the Beholder city, or what have you. And so they can prepare ahead of time to protect themselves against disintegrate and petrification, and they're rewarded for their preparation by not being subject to those effects. I actually think the Beholder is the best example of this, because once the party protects themselves against the instant death kind of things, the Beholder still has a whole bunch of other things it can do. So it works as a challenge even after the party prepares, knowing it's coming up. A Basilisk, a Cockatrice, a Medusa, not quite as much if you use them the Medusa just as a monster. But if you treat the Medusa in an intelligent fashion and put together, a structure around them where there's, minions that serve them, or for Medusas, because the Medusa can hide that she's this creepy snake lady and just pretend to be a regular creepy lady who wears a veil. You can have a whole lot of fun with that. Basilisk and Cockatrice, not quite so much in that, they don't subject lesser creatures to themselves, and they don't have a bunch of minions running around, but traveling off into the forest of statues that the Basilisk/Cockatrice lives in, it's pretty obvious. And once the party, normally at the level they're going to be doing this, they're not going to be able to maintain petrification protection on the entire party. So if they put their money together, maybe they can prevent just the fighter from being petrified, and everyone else will just have to deal with it. Or they might go in there and try their tactics with their eyes closed and what have you, and save up money to change anyone back from stone at the end of the adventure. So those all reward things. But then there's the Catoblepus. So the Catoblepus is a creature from the 1st edition monster manual, and I don't even really know how to describe it. Why would I say subscribe? It kind of looks like a water buffalo warthog brontosaurus, if that helps. The picture of it in the 1st edition monster manual is supposed to be intimidating, or, it's supposed to be giving you the evil eye, but it just looks stupid. But that's not the point. The point is you have this big quadruped mammal standing in a swamp or a stream or what have you. With a long neck, and it has a death gaze. The Catoblepas has a death gaze. It can look at you and then you die. This is not a creature that has a well-defined... Now, the picture specifically in the monster manual has it on like a wide-open Serengeti plain at the watering hole. So this is not a monster that has a cave in the forest somewhere where there's a bunch of stone statues that lead you to believe, oh, there might be a basilisk here. No, this is a dude that's hanging out in the middle of the plains and then suddenly looks at you and then you die. And that's it. There's no mastermind. There's no foreshadowing. That's it. And so I think that's a bad monster. So I don't like save or die monsters unless they're put together in a way that rewards player preparation. I think players should always be rewarded for thinking things through and preparing ahead of time. If I've not made it clear in the past, I think of D&D as a puzzle game. So I love the puzzles as a player. I love treating combat as a puzzle to be solved, and like in 4th edition especially. And those are the kinds of things that I enjoy about the game. The problem solving, the puzzle solving aspects of it. And so I like rewarding players for that style of play. Another set of creatures that I really don't like from the same kind of standpoint are the drain creatures. So these would be shadows, which cause strength damage, or any of the higher level undead that cause negative levels, or sturges, which do constitution drain. So the problem with these, particularly the one that comes up the most in games, is shadows. Shadows are challenge rating 3 in 3rd edition, so they're technically an appropriate, although difficult, encounter for first level parties. Well, one of them is. The problem with shadows is hit points are an abstraction. And to borrow a concept from Magic the Gathering, in Magic the Gathering you start with 20 life. But only 1 life matters. The other 19 life points that you have are completely irrelevant. Until you lose that last point, nothing changes in the game. You don't suddenly get to draw fewer cards or more cards or anything like that, although there are certain cards that make life matter. For the most part, until you lose that last life, it doesn't matter if you have 1 life or 1,000,000 life. It's all the same. Same thing in D&D with hit points. There's no debilitation or damage track that you follow where your character gets less effective as they take more damage. So until you lose that last hit point and go to 0 or below, you operate at maximum ability, whether you have 100 hit points or 1. When you have a creature like a shadow that doesn't deal hit point damage but deals strength damage, suddenly you have a creature where every point of damage has the ability to impact your fighting. So not only, most of the time if you're fighting against a shadow, they tend to attack the fighter types. Usually this is because it's used in lower level parties. It makes the most sense from the DM's perspective, in that the fighter is the one who's least likely to die. When a shadow drains your strength to 0 or less, or at least deals enough damage to get your strength down to 0, you die. And 1d4 rounds later, you rise as a shadow. So the DM doesn't want to destroy the party by hitting the wizard twice, and now you've got 2 shadows, and then they hit the rogue probably next, and then the cleric, and then the fighter last of all. Because, no, you'd go wizard, cleric, rogue, because getting rid of the wizards and the clerics gets rid of your ability to actually hit the incorporeal shadows. So that's partly also why shadows probably have an intelligence of 6. The game doesn't want you playing them intelligently because you will wreck a party. The game wants you to play them as barely intelligent. 3 is as low as you can possibly get. 6 is just childlike intelligence. So the strength draining creatures tend to go after the fighter types first because they have the most strength, they're least likely to die, They also tend to be the most afraid of the strength drain, or at least the most miffed by it. And so you end up with fighters, but like I said, unless you have an odd strength score and take 1 point of damage, you will have lower fighting effectiveness. It's going to lower your attack bonus, it's going to lower your damage bonus, and if it lowers enough points of strength, and this is a d6 per hit on the Shadows side, it will actually make, fighters too weak to wear their armor. So now you've messed with their armor class, the party's movement speed, and all kinds of stuff. They are a nightmare to deal with, and any monster's good as long as they're used appropriately. So I think there is definitely a role for Shadows to play. I like Shadows myself, but I think they're not the kind of monster where you get a lot of foreshadowing. Ha ha ha. Once again, it runs into the fact that you have to kind of engineer ways for the party to learn about the Shadows beforehand. They don't leave tracks, they don't leave droppings, they don't turn people into statues. All they are shadows, and they can hide in the walls because they're incorporeal and what have you. So there's no reason why the party should have any real forewarning of shadows. So you have to make a reason why. You have to have a rumor mill where, we've heard that the shadows themselves are alive in the castle ruins and things like that. Or someone else, another adventurer comes back to town and he's all wasted away and he's barely alive and he can hardly walk, and he mentions that he got ambushed by shadows. And that's a way to give the party information. In a way, it's a way to just give the party information. Preferably, the party would have to take some action. I'm cool with the DM giving out hints in this, but that the player has to follow up on in order to get any actual information. So maybe just mentioning maybe the rumor is that some guy just came crawling back into town, barely able to stand up and all wasted away, and then the PCs decide, we'll go talk to him and find out what that is. And then you're rewarding player behavior rather than just doling out the information. So that I like. But those are monsters that I definitely dislike because of the impact they have on combat. Another one that I dislike are any monsters that take away the player's ability to act. So once again, I think any monster has a place, and there are times when you can use it. But when you end up with a creature that, for example, like the Shadows with their strength drain, which prevent players from attacking effectively, or you have creatures that grapple. Grappling is always a pain too, especially when you grapple a guy. The two-handed weapon fighter can't use his two-handed weapon while he's grappled. Now, he's likely to be very strong and have a decent chance to get out of that grapple, so that's kind of okay. But then you grapple the wizard. Now, that's the smart thing to do, and if the wizard was dumb enough to walk to the front of this battle where he could be easily grabbed, then sure. I would dislike it very highly if a DM using an otherwise, not intelligent creature kind of goes out of his way to grab the wizard, because then it's pretty clear that this creature's not acting as it should, and that the DM obviously knows that grappling the wizard is the most effective way to render the wizard useless. And that would be literally useless, unless the wizard had forewarning and had the opportunity to prepare, for example, Still spell, where he can cast spells without somatic components. Then it's perfectly fine. But your average wizard shouldn't have, stilled spells prepared all the time, particularly at lower levels. Now, if you're dealing with 18th level wizard, then yeah, go ahead and grapple the wizard, because if he was too stupid to prepare a stilled spell to escape that, then he really shouldn't be playing that high level of a wizard. Same thing with the ability score damage caused by shadows. Low-level parties aren't going to have too many restoration spells just on hand or prepared for no good reason. So keep in mind that if you spring a shadow on a party unannounced, you are going to end up forcing them to rest, because the fighter with drained strength is very unlikely to want to go on. and the party's not going to have the spell at hand to restore it, and ability score damage heals at 1 point per day, so it's a very slow recovery, and everything is just bad. When it comes to just looking through the book and reading things and not liking them, the Aranea, which is a shape-changing spider thing, never really caught my fancy, and Ettercaps, which are these humanoid spider thingies, also for some reason never really caught my fancy. This is just from the 3rd edition book. I never really got them. I never really liked them. I didn't see a place for them. I've seen them in adventures, and I know that you can use them effectively. It's just they never appealed to me very much. I mentioned in the other video that the weird D&D monsters do appeal to me. So things like the Trapper, the Cloaker, the Lurker Above, which are monsters that are like giant flat creatures that look like walls and ceilings and floors of the dungeon, and like the Trapper. The Trapper is this big flat creature. Think like a manta ray or something, where it just lies really flat along the floor. And its back looks like stone tiles. And in the middle of its back, it might even have a chest, like a pseudopod chest that grows out of its back. And when someone approaches the chest and tries to open it, all 4 corners of the Trapper quickly snap up, and basically whoever was in the middle is now trapped like in a bag kind of deal, except that bag is the creature, and it starts to pummel you and crush you. And once you die, it'll eventually then absorb the nutrients from your body. Lurker Above is the same thing, but for a ceiling. Cloakers, well, I mean, a cloaker's not the same thing as that. A cloaker and a dark mantle, and a piercer. Piercers are like fake stalactites, and then they fall down when people walk underneath and pierce you, and then they slowly eat your body away from around them, and then they crawl very slowly back up the walls to the ceiling, where they wait in hiding to fall on the next guy. These are weird creatures that exist solely to trap dungeons, and I really love the idea of them, but as I've mentioned time and again, you have to think, what are your players going to do when you spring these kinds of creatures on them? Just like when you trap a random door, now the players decide they're going to check every door. As soon as one room happens to have a Lurker Above or a Trapper in it, suddenly now the party's going to be poking the floor and poking the ceiling in every room to make sure that there's nothing in there. But they definitely have their place. You can totally foreshadow those kinds of creatures. Mimics in a similar way. Mimics are something you can totally spring on a party. That's kind of their whole deal. And the party, usually you don't come across a treasure chest, literally a treasure chest, that often. Although mimics are another thing that you can try and foreshadow, and in ways that aren't necessarily the same as having people come crawling into town. A chest ate me. Chests are the most common mimic form in artwork, but mimics can actually mimic anything. They can be a chair or a bed or a door or all kinds of stuff. So they're fun too. But I would say overall my least favorite monsters are incorporeal undead. There are apparently differences between being a specter and being a phantasm and being a wraith and being a ghost. They're all slightly different, but they're all basically the same thing as far as I'm concerned. And other than story-wise, like sharing, he's a ghost who still haunts this place, combat against them is just too bogged down. And especially in 3rd edition, where ghosts are incorporeal and ethereal, and if you can manage to get onto the ethereal plane, then suddenly they're corporeal, or maybe they're incorporeal even on the ethereal plane, but if you can target an ethereal target, then you ignore the incorporeal mischance, and there's all kinds of weird stuff that goes on with that, and I don't like it very much. So I'd probably say my least favorite monster overall are the higher level incorporeal undead. Wraiths, ghosts, specters, phantasms, etc. I actually looked through the monster manual before making this to try and find the monsters that I dislike the most, and those are the ones that kind of come up again and again as an overall option. There's plenty of other monsters that I'm not too fond of, but there's many more monsters that I'm totally in favor of. Well, until next time, bye-bye.